Hey my crafty creatures, thank you for tuning into this video. So for this video, I wanted to go ahead and start working on the duster that I talked about in my recent videos. And for that, I wanted to go with a pattern that I thought would be simple enough that, anybody can make. So I found the pattern I wanted, and now I am going to be going ahead and making that. Now I am looking forward to this. I'm hoping that everything aligns up the way I want it to. I did check the sizing on that, and I'm going to go with a size medium. I want it to be a little oversized and I don't want it to fit like perfectly, and I think that's going to be my best option. Now the pattern I do have, it is only from extra small to medium, so if it was any larger I would not even have that as an option. So I'm going to go ahead. I've already cut out all the pieces, and I just need to make sure that I get those cut out into the fabric and then actually sew it together. So I am going to be taking you guys along in this process of me sewing this together, and I will show you all the modifications I make, which is mainly just going to be the pocket. I always end up having to make the pockets bigger, so that's the one thing I know for sure I'll be doing for this project. Alright, so I have pulled out my pocket pattern piece, and I have just a scrap piece of tracing paper, and I have my phone just so I can kind of see where I want that extra length to be. So right here there's a line that shows where the top of the pocket will be, and with that I'm thinking that my phone will fit like just barely into this. So what I want to do is add some extra length down here at the bottom. I think I'm just going to go simple and just add 1.5 inches to the bottom of that. That way it makes it a little easier to fit the pocket in there. Fit the phone into the pocket. That way I don't have to worry about it like falling out or anything like that while I'm wearing it. So let me get the ruler that I need for this, and we're going to be measuring out 1.5. Alright, so I have gone ahead and transferred all of the markings. I've written on the pattern so I know which piece it is and what pattern it goes to, and then I'm just going to cut this out, and then I can use that in place of this pocket piece for the whole pattern. And this is one of the main reasons I like using tracing paper, because as long as you have a sharp pair of scissors, you can actually just glide it straight through the paper instead of having to make individual cuts. All right, so I have done everything I can to try to get everything laid out so that these pattern pieces fit on here. My cutting mat is not big enough, and I'm going to have to like move some things around, maybe even switch over from like rotary cutter to like scissors. The pattern piece isn't like fully like cut directly to the line, so that'll be something I'm going to have to kind of maneuver around while I'm actually cutting this out. I've also folded this up. I'm not sure how much it is, but where I had the pattern pieces folded up, that ended up just working up for the length that I needed to take off for it to hit a few inches above my ankle. Because if I did it like as is, it would be basically just hitting the ground, which I don't want it to be that long. I want it to be a little bit shorter, so I just folded up that amount of space. I think it's roughly around 6 inches, maybe 8. But I figured that would be a good height for me. And I'm just going to cut everything out now. Alright, so I've already had a few issues. So the way I was cutting out the fabric, I ended up having to shorten this by like, I want to say like 3 more inches, and wasn't happy about that, but I gotta do what I gotta do. I'll end up cutting it off of this fabric later, just so I can see exactly where it is. But I am starting with the neckband pieces just by sewing them together. I have already interfaced all of them so they are ready to be sewn. Alright, so now I have all of the pieces of the facing sewn together. I'm just going to press it out. I'm going to trim off some of the excess, and I'm going to set this aside and then get started on the other pieces. Alright, so I'm not sure if I have that last piece recorded, but I'm going to get started on the pocket pieces. So the first thing I need to do is fold this down, and then I'm going to be sewing 5/8 of an inch all the way down to the point where this overlaps. Alright, so I decided to put this at 1/2 inch just to give me a little extra space for the pocket. That's probably going to affect the placement of it a little bit, but I figured I'd rather have a little more space than not enough. Okay, so after that, it wants me to trim down this part a little bit. And then you're just going to clip this part off and do that for both sides. And then we're going to flip it so that the right side's out. And then we're going to press around all of the edges so that everything fits nicely on the inside. Okay, so I have pressed everything and I snipped the corners so that they don't overlap too much, creating too much bulk. So you see it kind of looks like that now. And I'll just fold those under. And right now I need to just do a top stitch right here just to hold this part in place so that it doesn't flip up as you're, putting things in and out. Alright, so it's been a couple of days and I got to pick up where I left off. So right now I'm attaching the pockets to where I have marked out onto the fabric. I will take some pins and put those in place because I don't want them to shift around while I am trying to get this sewn on. Okay, so now that I have it all pinned down, I'm going to sew it. I'm just going to extend my stitch length just by a little bit. And I'm going to sew about 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the pocket. Alright, so now that I have the pockets sewn on, I can actually start attaching the front and back pieces. So I'm going to lay this out and get the front pieces and attach them to the right side. Alright, now I'm just going to use a straight stitch for that. I could use a zigzag, but since it's the shoulder and I don't want there to be much stretch there, I'm just going to do a straight stitch. Oh, now I have the dilemma of deciding if I want to change the threads or just use gray on this black fabric. I will change out the threads for my serger. That way, this doesn't look crazy when I finish it. But I'm not excited about forgetting to do that earlier before I started sewing. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and change the thread on my serger, and then I will serge all of these edges as I finish them. So this isn't something that's in the instructions, but it's something that I like to do, and that's just putting a top stitch. I'm just going to put it right across this shoulder seam on both sides. I will probably also do this for the side seams as well. All right, so I am not sure how easy this is going to be for you to see, but I have, if I can see, okay. So I have the sleeves clipped up to the armholes, and I'm going to be sewing all the way through the shoulder, all the way to the other side. And for some reason, I just decided to not use the 5/8 seam allowance that I'm supposed to. I started doing a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to go back and sew that. Actually, I need to seam rip because I've also misaligned it. Alright, so now that I have those sewn together, I am going to serge that edge as well. I think I will just press this as far as the seam allowance goes. I don't think I'm going to do that top stitch to it as well. Okay, so immediately after saying that I wasn't going to sew it, I see in the instructions it says to do it. And I kind of decided that I wanted to have it there anyways. That way that seam just doesn't flop around and always stays flat in its place. So I am going to do a top stitch on both of the sleeves, and then I can sew up the side seams. Now I can do the side seams for both sides. And I'll just continue that same process of sewing, serging, top stitching. I was doing so well. I was sewing up the side, did that pretty well, but when I went to serge the edge, I got some fabric caught in there, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but this little area right here is all messed up. I pulled this part in, so now I have quite a big chunk of it that has been sewn into that serged edge, and because it has the cutter on it, I'm pretty sure it cut a big hole into my fabric. So that means either it's going to stay like this or I have to cut a whole new piece, which means that I will need to buy another 1.5 yards of fabric so that I can finish this. Oh, I am not happy with this. I'm going to assess the damage. It is at the side seam, so I might be able to like patch something together. I was going through the trash and I found that this little chunk right here, which is what I think I ended up cutting off, which is not that big of a hole, and maybe I can just kind of hand sew it back into place or do like a little patch or something. I don't know. We'll see. I have to take this out and see what I can salvage and if I can salvage, but yeah, I'll come back once I figure that out. All right, so I was able to figure out something. I have a piece of the fabric of my scrap fabric that I've pinned in here, and I've tried my best to kind of like line it up. I did kind of stretch out the fabric, but you can see right there, you can barely tell the difference. So I think I'm just going to do like a little straight stitch around, maybe 2 sets of straight stitches around. That way it holds that in place and then it kind of blends in. So definitely be very, very careful about where your fabric is sitting as you're like sewing with the serger, because just as easily can cut a hole like I did. So let me get that sewn in there and then we'll see how it looks. All right, and now I can go ahead and cut off the excess since I've done that double stitch on there. And I'm trying to be so careful not to cut another hole in here. So there's the patch right there. You can see the stitching that's going over the moon, but other than that, I think it's pretty good. I am so upset with myself that I missed that, but now I can go ahead and try to finish up this top stitch that I was working on when I figured out that I had done that. All right, so I am working on doing this top stitch along the whole side, And I'm actually going up into the sleeve, and I wanted to show you a little bit of that process of me getting all the way into the sleeve, since it's not going to be easy. So what I did is I started from the bottom, working my way all the way up to the armhole. And then I'm just going to continue sewing along. Making sure that I'm guiding the fabric through so that it stays lined up with this edge of the presser foot, so that I get an even line all the way through. And as I start to get into that armhole, I'm pulling the fabric forward, but making sure that it's staying out of the way of the sewing machine, and then slowly sewing on. Alright, now I've made it all the way to the end, and now I'm just pulling the fabric back through. I'm going to snip the thread just so it makes it a little easier for me to pull that out. Then I'll just pull the sleeve all the way through, and then slide the the fabric through the presser foot. And there, I have it sewn all the way up through to the sleeve. Okay, so now what I'm about to do is just add a stay stitch on the back neckline, just so it doesn't stretch out while I'm adding the collar, because that'll be the next thing I do. So with that, I'm going to make sure my presser foot is up and switch to the widest stitch length, and then just sew around that curve. Now with that, you do want to back stitch just so it doesn't stretch out. Alright, so now I am moving over to the collar, and right now I'm just going to do so right now all I'm going to do is going to sew these two pieces together, both front and back of it, using that 5/8 seam allowance. And I'm going to do the same thing with the piece that I have interfaced. Alright, I'm going to take this over to the ironing machine and flatten out these seams so that they lay flat and create less bulk. I probably will be trimming off some of this. I'm not sure if it says that in the instructions, but I'm going to do that just to make sure that I don't have as much fabric left over. Alright, so I have the collar clipped up, and I just did this mainly because there's interfacing on one side and it's just regular stretch fabric on the other. This is going to help to reduce the stretching of the fabric without the interfacing. So let's get that done. Now I can already tell that it has stretched out a little bit, just from like here. There's just a little bit of overhang, but it should still be good. I am going to sew this up now, and it basically wants you to sew from this little corner here all the way around to the other corner. And I'm sewing a little bit slower because I can still see that there's a lot of give. So I'm just keeping my fingers close to this point so that I can push the fabric that way. That way it doesn't overstretch it, so that I end up don't lining up on this end over here. All right, so I am going to trim off some of the excess here, and then I'm going to flip it so that it's right side out and press that seam down. So for the last few steps, I did forget to actually hit record on my mic, so I don't have the audio of what I was trying to explain here. But in the video, I am talking about me finishing pressing out the collar, and then I just did a straight stitch on here just to hold the two layers together to make it a lot easier for me to sew it to the rest of the cardigan. So now that I have the collar sewn in, I am going through and sewing the facing onto the whole front side of the cardigan. And now that I have that all pinned in place, I will sew that in place, and then I'm going to do a understitch and then press and fold it to the other side. And once I get that done, I can sew the final side down. That way everything is nice and neat and covered into it. Unfortunately, I was not able to get this like talk through done like in the video, so I'm probably missing some details in there, but This was pretty much straightforward. Just follow along with the pattern and it should get you there. But that is the final step, and then it'll be ready for me to show you guys what it looks like. Alright guys, so it has been actually a couple months since I actually finished this. I started this in October and it is now January when I'm finally getting to like editing and everything. And I wanted to bring up a few points that I figured out after, wearing this a couple of times and seeing like the things that I want to change about it. So the first thing, the sleeves are good on here. Sometimes I do wish it was like a little bit smaller, just like by a little bit, maybe like an inch smaller. So I think if I make this again, I'm going to shrink that sleeve down just a little bit at the end, but otherwise the rest of it fits pretty good. Another thing I was having an issue was where this kind of sits, like this V. I would prefer it to be just a little bit higher, so I would take that part up a little bit so that it sits more comfortable to me. The other thing I had an issue with was the pockets, and really it was just that I wish I would have made it just a little bit wider because I feel like it just fits my hand in there. And when I have my phone in it, it just kind of feels like everything's a little bit tight. Not too much, but just like a little bit tighter than I would have preferred. So I probably would have extended the pocket just a little bit, maybe just like half an inch, just to get that little extra space, because there's not much space on the front to really get like a big pocket. So I'd probably push it more towards the center and do it that way. And the other issue I had was when I walk in this, I feel it actually catch onto my pants and stuff like that. So I think what I would want to do is on the side, just add a little like godet or something like that to give it a little extra space, that when I walk and have this button, it doesn't like catch onto my pants. Because I've had it happen a couple of times where I've been walking with the button and then the button just pops loose. So I think having that extra space, probably starting around here and then just spreading out to add like an extra maybe about extra 6 inches on each side, because I want it to have a little more flair, a little more pizzazz once you like do that spin, because like as you can see with the spin, it barely goes anywhere. And that might have something to do with the fabric that I choose. But I noticed that when I do take those steps, it would catch onto my pants and then cause this button to just pop loose. So I think with those modifications, this could be even better. But this was definitely a good base to kind of get an idea of what I want more. I do love this. I do want to make another one in like a thicker fabric that is better for the winter. But otherwise, I really like this piece, and hopefully in the spring I can get a little more use out of it. I wasn't able to get much use out of it in the fall because winter came and then it was just too cold to even wear this. And see right there, that just popped loose just from me having my hands in the pockets. So the button here isn't as strong as I would want it to be. And I think I might have to even go with a bigger button because the buttonhole is stretching out because of the fabric I used, and the interfacing wasn't doing enough of a job to kind of hold that all together. So I might have to go with a bigger button on this. And I also kind of placed my button in the wrong spot too. I think it should be a little bit higher so that it sits right about here. And right now it currently sits just below that, which I think I guess I was just like ready to be done with it. And I was just like, oh crap, I don't know where to put the button. And I just put it anywhere. So those are a couple of the things that I would want to change about it, but otherwise this is a really good piece and I am so happy that I made it. And even though I did have to make some adjustments along the way, it still came out really good, and I do get compliments on this, so I am so excited about it, of having this like in my wardrobe now. And I hope you guys like this, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.